forget Hari Mohan as well, because those Indians, they're here to invest, get property, become landowners. Since the previous talk I gave, where I was referring to my academic record, the printout of my academic record, the invisible ghost who thinks he's God or is playing of being God has taken my academic record. And I've been here 10 years, and this person wants me to contribute to his lifestyle, but he never comes to the door and says, please contribute to my lifestyle. There are perverts. They have a pervert as the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. And what does she look like? Oh, she looks like the Emperor of Japan in a sort of distorted fashion. So what I had to do after those two, I mentioned the two books had been taken, was I had to get a copy printed of Meditation. This is, if you can see it, there's a set of the picture is taken in a graveyard that was owned by a non-British government. And I have found that here in South Australia, when these, insane people are doing what they're doing, they stop doing it if I go into a cemetery. And why is that? All right, so my glasses are a different type of glasses now, because I've got to sort of see it in terms of how these people are. I'll read the first part of Meditation, which was created by me in 2010, I think it was. Which was quite a long time ago, but I had most of these writings, just collecting dust. Okay, so number one, I was looking around to see if I could find something to do, only there wasn't anything going. It was a cold and wet morning, and the computer had finished its SETI and Einstein tasks. Their science computations done to find signs of extraterrestrial life. SETI is an acronym for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence and involves downloading a file that was recorded earlier in the year at a radio telescope site and allowing your computer to analyze it for anything unusual. Einstein is much the same, but what you're looking for is different. They run when the screensaver is active, but the connection to the sites is rather hard to establish, meaning that you get messages about how the computer can't resolve the host name. Sometimes it works fine, other times it doesn't work at all. Right now I've got 8 or 9 files to upload to the sites, and every time I try I get the message from the computer, can't resolve host names. The end of it, of this short booklet, it's not a boast, but it can be a boast if you wish. I learned about boasting when I came into contact with Professor Ross Carlucci and gave him a 20-page outline of sort of things that weren't connected to the Kennedy assassination, but which were taking place at the time that everybody sort of has just forgotten about. And so what he did is boasted by placing a 20-foot, 30-foot wide sign at number 1 Unley Road, because he believes that's where the idea of the United Nations comes from, the UN as Unlee Road. And the Lee part would be Lee Harvey Oswald or something. And so he boasted by putting that sign, reading Kennedy, 20 feet, 30 feet wide, at number 1 Unley Road. And of course, he's an Italian. And Italians can fall back on, the 2,000, 4,000-year-old Italian Roman Empire. We crucified Jesus. The whole thing. But it's all rubbish. But the thing about this book, for example, is in Maharishi meditation, at least here in Adelaide, what they got you to do, or what they believe was the initiation ceremony, was just acting out parts of the so-called dream revelation of the Bible, the New Testament. And so what the initiator did was get down on his knees, or hands and knees, or on his knee, as described in that part of the book of Revelation. And that was all there was to it. But was it real? Was it actual? No, it was their way of capitalizing on something that was supposed to be, sacred and pure and holy. But they wanted to make money off it, and they really did make a hell of a lot of money off it. But if you want to know what the initiation ceremony was for those guys, just read that book of Revelations where the person I saw someone get down on their knee or something. Well, that's what the initiation ceremony supposedly was. But when it came down to what it was they wanted to put a Protestant in as the United States president, because Britain is the home of Protestantism or Anglicanism or something that isn't. But if you happen to be living there, you'll find that there wasn't some huge conflict between Catholicism and Britain. The conflicts that happened in Britain were between different cults. The wars that happened in Britain that went on for 1,000, 2,000 years were different cults, or the North versus the South, Scotland versus England, or the Wales were blah, blah, blah. So I'm telling you, there's a new version of, here's another one. This is interesting. I prefer this one. This explains the starting point of my academic studies. And one very short, small aspect of my entire year work was a survey into lifestyles on campus. And what I found was that heroin dealing, that mystical drug, which Timothy Leary describes as if you use it or sell it, you're having a near-death experience. And so, for example, he at one point described some of the mystique of using heroin, where you want to get a dose just at the right size, so you almost overdose and you almost die, but you get just close enough to experience what you think is death, near-death experience. And that's the only thrill or high or purpose you get out of the heroin. Which is why millions and millions of people still use it, because they're idiots. Okay, but this just explained. I did a short study as one part of four different faculties. One part, 2 months at most. And that formed the basis of everything that certain people did to me from then on, because it involved how much dope were you doing at the university, and what type of dope were you doing? And some people were doing marijuana and had been for a long time. And at the time, I knew people who were 10, 20, 10 years older than me who had a lot of experience with marijuana, and they don't want to use anything else, and they don't even want to drink a beer. But what you had on the campus was people involved in heroin, and they were in the law school. And so I thought, even after they took all the results and did things, was, well, it's confined to the university. Maybe when they graduate or leave the university, they'll do something else to make money. But what I didn't realize is money wasn't the sole determining factor. And no, they didn't stop using heroin. It became some people, their career, their lifestyle, the whole thing for the next 50 years. And one such person, has a mate here in number 4 to whom they gave a car to. And what is that? Well, that's Protestantism, isn't it? If you want to look at it that way, that's Protestantism. But now if I want to cite my academic record, I'll have to get another copy of my academic record, because what we're talking about, what I'm talking about, is what used to be defined as insanity. So let's say the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia is an insane woman, who vaguely looks like the Japanese emperor, or whatever he is, the god. But it's not going to stop, you see, and that's the whole point of the teaching of SRF. If you want to look at it in a different way, they just wanted to introduce a different type of Protestantism. As I said earlier, there was no great conflict between the Catholic Church in Europe and the British, Christian cults that they had there. And all the wars that were taking place in Britain were between different cults in Britain, But anyway, there's a new version of this book out. This is called On the Mountain, the Cold War. The new version has one final chapter added just the other day. I told a girl today at the Audi shops about it. She wrote down the name of the book and said, I might look that up. Because the other thing here is there are no bookshops anymore. Even the university bookshops. I did visit an Adelaide University bookshop a couple of years ago. They had nothing but law books, no arts, no history books, nothing. It's all online now. But no hard things that you can hold in your hand and read. All law books. And the law books, by the way, some of them cost $500 for a 200, 300-page book. So that's that. There is a new version of this out. I've just made it available free of charge. No one's interested in reading it. What do I know about Ukraine? Oh, well, I did in the last couple of years look up Ukraine. Why did I look up Ukraine? How do I put this? My mother was a classically trained musician. She'd done various also courses in medicine, not nursing, medicine, but none of that was allowed to be expressed in Australia or Germany when they took her prisoner. None of that was allowed to be expressed. So that we kids or her children only knew her as this woman who was not 100% healthy or well, and who experienced some terrible, dreadful things at the hands of the Germans, that's all we knew. And it took me, years and years and years just to find out the most basic things about it. And so she very generously did a very short performance of a classical piece. I used to wonder, why do we have a piano? Because she doesn't play it. Why do we have a piano? The old style thinking of where you want your kids to be, anyway. And so what happened was, just one day, after the Hare Krishnas had taken her captive, those guys who force themselves onto you and, nothing at all. Well, she was starting to work for the, what was it called? Meals on Wheels, which was not a bad organization here, where you could join it and they would deliver 1 or 2 full meals to your home every day of the week. And it was cheaper than a Chinese meal, say the Chinese takeaway or a Indian takeaway. The amount of protein wasn't really as high as it should have been. But my dear old mother started, doing that and really enjoyed herself. But then she felt that she could come out and reveal what she was. And I was really quite surprised to see that she could remember stuff that she'd learned when she was 8, 10, 12 years old as a classically trained musician. I mentioned academic stuff in my previous talk that I was referring to, such as books I studied in Economics 2 or Economics 101. Like at our university, had a couple of 4 different units or something, and then you sort of specialize and you can do a unit from another faculty. And so what I did is a unit from economics. But when I started reading those economic books, I was just appalled to think that that's what they're teaching people to do inside the economy. And so what it came down to was that they were teaching people to be heartless, cold-blooded people who just did nothing but rob other people using supposedly legal means. And that was called the economic theory that was being taught to students so they could then join the workforce as businessmen or advisors in the economic sphere. And that would help make money for them and continue on with those ideas where the purpose wasn't to help anybody or to have any compassion or kindness to anybody. It was just to follow through an economic theory, which was described as a classical economic theory. For example, Marxism wasn't taught as an economic theory. For us, in our study of Marx, it was taught as part of the history of South Australia. You wrote about the 2 extinct volcanoes down south. Oh, and Hitler wrote about Icing Road, and wow, we're Germans, and we're going to keep this place, South Australia, for the next 1,000,000 years, and it's going to be a German settlement, and we're going to rule the world from it. And if you've ever heard anything more false than that, you'd know how it felt. So I suppose I should say that one of the most evil characters I've ever encountered. Oh, no, stop, go back one step. I found that all external to academic studies, see, academic studies, even at high school, they weren't designed to teach you how to interact with each other or to members of the quote-unquote opposite sex. But what I found is that anything outside the academic curriculum, that's primary school, high school, and university, anything that was being taught to you, that was being foisted onto you, took you to the wrong path and the wrong direction. So things like TM, Maharishi meditation, totally wrong. Just takes you away from what you are doing and thinking. Labour Party, for example, just takes you away from who you are. And so now I have to get another copy of my academic record because we have, the doctor was saying the other day, I said, because, he knows what's been going on now for 10 years. And if I say, this week the speakers attached to the computer, the TV were broken, he's seen this sort of thing before. And he'd just say, well, that'll cost you more, won't it? And Moore's, there was a place called the Moore's store, which was taken over by communists. We'll call them communists rather than the Labour Party. The thing about a movie I watched the other day by Clint Eastwood called Play Misty for Me, apart from how they changed the name of a suburb here, Parkside, into Eastwood, he was saying, it's a bad premiere. And the funny thing was, I was just outside for a drive to buy some biscuits at Audi, and it occurred to me that I have knowledge. I've studied this, and they wanted me to forget it all. But all those captured nations, or what were described as captured nations of the USSR, all of them had a premier as the focal point, the leader of the government. And why is that? Are they all totally crackers, sort of thing? I mean, movies have premieres, but they're called premieres because the leader of the government in places like Australia were called premiers. So I'm telling you, mate, this can't be stopped. The world is going to go down the path, and it's going to go down to the level where, for example, the only thing they want in Australia is they're sitting around waiting for 2,000 years for the British royals to come here so we can see them. Anyway. So somebody that after the last talk, they took my academic record. They also did some other stuff. I had to therefore order. They took this book and they took this book. They did this before, and the character who's doing it, through his activity, has confessed to being a member of a gang that was doing the same thing to me 40 years ago at St. Peter's, 7th Avenue, St. Peter's, number 1, 35A, 7th Avenue. I sent a copy of a letter of credential with that address on it to the Premier's department with a short note saying, well, blah, blah, blah. And so the Premier's department, supposedly supposedly a government department has contacted their people in show business, and they placed a whole bunch of posters at the car park next to the petrol station with the address on it, 135A 7th Avenue, St. Peter's. Okay, what does that mean? It means to them, compared to the whole history of, say, World War II, or the whole history of what Australia did to the world when it introduced socialism as the war movement, the killing of one president is just a trifle. They killed so many people in World War One and millions and millions in World War II. I think the figure was the Russians lost 30 or 40 million people in World War II. 6 million Jews, mostly Germans, just extinguished, put in the fire and burnt, so on and so on. And so their idea was, killing Kennedy's nothing. He's just the president. Doesn't mean a thing. We did this. And they wander around literally thinking, our new nation, socialism, did this to the planet. And I can't see the connection. I can't see how it did any of that. If you follow my train of thought, I can't see how it did any of that. That's an illusion. But you got to live with it. And so I did look up the statistics regarding my life expectancy. And according to statistics, usually people who've gone through the things I've gone through die between the age of 69 and 72. And that's something to look forward to. The other thing I'm going to say is I don't believe Prince Charles or King Charles has any form of cancer. I think the British are really, really clever people. And so what they're talking about is a character here in South Australia, or was in South Australia, whose astrology, whose star sign was Cancer. And once again, he also changed the course of this entire state. And because of him, the entire course of American politics. And his astrology was a Cancer. And so when they say King Charles has cancer, I don't believe it. They're alluding to the local character here. They always tell lies. They can't come on TV and say, well, we discovered once the Ottoman Empire had been destroyed and all that sort of stuff, that E equals MC squared. And we discovered that's his surname, and we discovered we can split the atom, and that's a town called Split, and we can split the atom, and if we do that, we can cause a huge explosion to take place as a bomb that can kill 100,000 people or 50,000 people just like that in less than 20 seconds. And we'll do it to Japan and stuff like that. So thank God Timothy Leary existed. Thank God Timothy Leary existed. It's funny. The other thing, it's funny. Okay, what's her name? Taylor Swift. See, they're really sick people. Really stupid people. People who couldn't rub two brain cells together if it wasn't, if they weren't killing someone, sort of thing. But anyway, okay, well, I'm just going to keep talking, but now I have to get another copy if I want to. Now I have to get another copy of my academic record because someone who's reacted to my last talk has arranged to come in and take the copy of my academic record. How to understand it? How to understand this type of behavior? I've read books about this kind of thing. I've read novels about this kind of thing in English courses going for 3 years. I read studies in psychology about this sort of thing. Later on, postgraduate in psychiatry, Freud, Jung, I've read studies about this kind of thing, where it's described as fetishism and various other things, where certain types of persons involved in a certain type of mindset assume your identity, parts of your personal identity. And what I noticed a long time ago is that most of them are in show business, and most of them are in the United States, but there are some in Britain as well. I guess it all came down to who was their manager, who thrust them onto the population. So in conclusion, I can say that if you ever get the chance to do anything academic, don't drop out. Don't leave the academic approach to life. If you do, and you get influenced by all these other people trying to teach something to make money and to get a following, you'll just end up nowhere. Or you'll end up coming all the way from Brighton Beach to have a Baba dinner at the local Chinese restaurant in St. Peter's. Or you'll go to the Lebanese shop there and have the guy there with his Chinese apprentice doing this, that, the other thing. What am I talking about? I'm talking about living without thinking, living life not based upon thought, but based upon, what is the simplest, the easiest thing to do. And one of the easiest and simplest things to do is to live only for yourself and your own personal survival, which is, that's a new religious credo as well, called Scientology. Never help anybody, never do good in the society, as a conceptual good, but always do things to help, your employer, if it's the state. So I'm now going to smoke a cigarette and just once again say, as a result of that previous talk I recorded, which nobody watched, someone came in and took the copy of my academic record. That one I've read about, and I've seen movies about this sort of thing. People will come in and pee in your bed, or they'll do other things in your bed, or they'll leave feces in your toilet. Talking about people, if you want to look at it compassionately, you can say they're acting at the level of someone who's less than 2 years old, someone whose mindset is less than 2 years old, but they're in an adult body. They belong in some kind of institution, or they need to be taking some kind of drug. But nobody in the society would do anything like that to them because they're easy to control. You know what I mean? So Play Misty for me was about bad premier. And so all those captive nations, all those nations that went socialist, either through choice or being forced to, including the United States of America, had premiers as the leaders, and that was supposed to be an idea coming from that Indian guru who met President Coolidge. I know somebody who sees everything as nothing more than movies. Yeah, that's the premier. That's the film director. It's all rubbish, is what I'm saying. It's all rubbish, is what I'm saying. So anyway, it's really terrible what's been going on in what is now called the Ukraine, because since I've been living here, all the Communist Party people have shown up and approached me and physically, you might say, confronted me. There's the Italian Communist Party, the German Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, the North Korean Communist Party, the Australian Communist Party, who happen to be in government now. They have no sort of policy apart from just wishing to be in government. That's all they want. They're thinking like old-fashioned people who want a monopoly. But they can't use their position to make tons and tons and tons of money for themselves. And so that's why they fail to be good human beings or good citizens. Plus, they're very, very racist. They're very, very racist. So, just in conclusion, I might say, something that my sister taught me about. For example, there's a shop down the corner here called Gordon Fox. Now, Gordon was the father of a character who was mentally deformed, autistic, could barely think. Did a Scientology course and thought that he now knew something and started selling heroin and kept selling heroin as a career, became part of a criminal organization as a career that went on 50 years. That's like the British tradition in one way. It's what they used to do in Britain. In America, it was slightly different because they could build a nation. They could build railways. They could build skyscrapers. They could build things. But in Britain, it was all there already. You know what I'm saying? If you've ever been to Britain, anyway, and in Europe, it's similar to that too. There's a lot of stuff there that's been there for, donkey's years. And, oh, well, anyway. So how did I get to sleep when I was in Paris? Let me just tell you. I'd just been to this place in Switzerland where there was a mountain, and it was the first time I'd actually seen a mountain covered in snow. And I met some locals, and the locals were just what I would call normal, but they were in the German section, normal kids, where things like go and spend the weekend at your girlfriend's parents' home was the acceptable and normal thing to do. Nothing like that takes place here in South Australia. They don't encourage it. They don't want you to do it. Everything has to be, a formal complaint against somebody. When you're living in a police state, anyway. So how did I get to sleep in Paris? Well, I was wandering around Paris. I saw the river, the Seine, and all that stuff. And there were just tons and tons of Japanese tourists. And everywhere I went, there were these Japanese tourists with their Japanese-made cameras taking snapshots, pictures of Paris. And I thought it was just hilarious because, for example, the Eiffel Tower wasn't lit up or anything. And so they went off to, the cathedral, the what's it called? Notre Dame, and the river and various other places. And they're all there with their cameras made in Japan that they're taking all the way from Japan to Europe. And they're taking pictures of all these places. And then to carry it forward later on, those places would get burned to the ground. Ha ha ha. But anyway, what I did is went to bed in a nice little warm hotel off the center of Paris. Closed my eyes and started. I'd never had a dream before in my life. In Australia, there's nothing to dream about. The best thing you can dream about are a bunch of Aborigines wandering around pretending they're Shakespeare or vice versa, and just making some funny noise. But in Paris, it was funny because I closed my eyes and started dreaming to get to sleep. And I fell asleep when I'd passed through the levels of recent history. Like the first thing you have to think about is, that British king and Hitler shaking hands in Paris. And then the next level is another level, and then there's another level, and then finally you get to the point where royals are having their heads chopped off, and that becomes chicken, as Bob Dylan got the idea from me. That becomes chicken every night. Those royals, their heads being chopped off, they're just chickens, and we'll have chicken for dinner every night. Plus, the standard of the Australian broadcasting system is called POW, because there was a character where we first lived who once a month would cut off the head of a chicken and cook it, and to pull the feathers off too, named POW. So that's the level that Australia works at. That's the level that this society works at. That's the level the entire planet works at. But I found that if you're in Europe, say, or even Britain, but less so in Britain because various things happen there. If you're in Europe, you can feel free. You can feel as if you're a human being or a god if you want, but you can feel free. But I didn't go to Italy, and I know for sure you can't feel free in Italy. And I sure as hell didn't want to go to America because you can't feel free there. And I sure as hell didn't want. One idea was that I would catch a plane to Canada, and from Canada go to New York. But you see, I've been enslaved by some local businessmen whose only idea of business was to lend money or to swap things that people owned for money. And when I moved here, the son of the guy who was doing that, whose name was Laurie, the pawnbroker, and they had his personality on TV, Channel 9, as the biggest star of the TV shows, named Laurie. They also used my father's history as part of their TV show because I don't know, 49, 47, he worked at Rooty Hills. So they had, we'll put Rooty Hills on Channel 9 TV. You know, that type of complete and utter garbage. Oh, and so what happened was that Laurie Treadray, the Sultan of Swap, the pawnbroker, moved from Unley Road to King William Road. I'll get this over and done within 10 minutes. Moved to King William Road, where I used to live. And so where Arnold used to live, they put a big new building on, must have cost them $200 million or $5 million. And shops then followed Laurie the pawnbroker to King William Street. And so whereas King William Street used to have maybe 3 shops that you could buy something in, it's now full of shops, and they're redoing all the area in terms of stupidity. And the only street that they haven't done it to is Mansfield Street, because in the 60s, I lived there, and a nearby street was called Mansfield Street. In fact, it was almost opposite where I lived. And in the USA, the centerfold, the Playboy model cover of Playboy was Jane Mansfield. So to complete this ridiculous story, an Indian guru, supposedly, a character had gone to a university, who therefore had learned some basic rules of logic and reasoning, was asked to write a poem about the local orange man, the local premier, the man who represented Protestantism in South Australia. And so the poem came out, and it was a terribly written poem, had nothing in it. It was just so mechanical. And forced, called Hello Playmate, I'm Here. Now, the ex-army guy, Hugh Hefner, was involved in this setup, and started publishing Hello Playmate, I'm Here as Playmate magazine with pictures of naked or semi-naked women inside and on the cover. And in the first edition, you got a free book if you were in Australia, and the free book was Fahrenheit 451, where rather than the firemen put the fires out, the firemen, this is Nazi Germany stuff that he's talking about, where the firemen set the fires, which is what the Nazis did when they were ravaging throughout Europe. Set places on fire, set people on fire, set the world on fire, because this is the new era of media that had never existed before. And so the neighbor at that address became the local distributor of Playboy magazine. His name was Jack Watts. And thereafter, throughout my life, an organization set fires wherever I was, if it had anything to do with a female member of the opposite sex. You know what I'm saying? I don't think you want to know. So I one of the books that I did begin to read, I think for maybe philosophy unit at second year, was The Insane Society, which was a short run book, 300 pages, where he talks about, it might even have been a Jew who wrote it, where he talks about societies where insanity can be the norm, where if everybody's insane, then it will function this way, and they'll do that, and blah blah blah, and they'll get rid of anybody who isn't insane. And in that sense, you can understand what happened to Europe and also Russia and Ukraine, where once the socialism began to take over, the sane people who could afford it or who were able to left the country. You know what I'm saying? My mother explained it to me just around about when she performed from memory something she'd learned 60 years earlier, a classical piece of music, in terms of the reason we didn't leave is we didn't know what was happening. We had no contact with the West. Nobody told us what was happening. We had to watch it happen right before our eyes as if it's a movie. And, that's how we were able to get away from them and escape. But her judgment, let's say, is that Australia wasn't much better. Slightly better than than 1920 or 1930 when the Russians took over. So I'm really not depressed, but I did meet a character here who was saying that he drinks, and every time he has a drink, afterwards goes to sleep, wakes up, and then he feels depressed because there's no life in Australia. There's no life teachings. As far as I know, all the churches have been closed down. In particular, the Methodist churches have been closed down. There's no life. I mean, literally life. The Indians took over America with the atom bomb, saying, I'm death personified. And if you study the Indian whole, everything they've ever done, it's always about that sort of thing. I am death. They don't have any teachings about I am life or how to live. So that's the end of the story, really. I think by taking over India as part of the British Commonwealth, you'll find that all the nations in the British Commonwealth were absolutely corrupted by being in contact with India. Because basically, if you want to look at it from that point of view, there were no Christians there. All right, well, I'll finish the cigarette. And so the difficulty in obtaining another to put it in a different way, by now they have enough of my personal stuff to be able to pass themselves off as me. They've taken passports, identification documents, all sorts of things. And if they want to pass themselves off as the author or as the guy who's in this book or that book or who did that TV show, it'll be really easy to do, particularly once I'm gone. These are people who think they don't think, it's just a political ideology of organized crime. It happened in Britain, that was one of the traditional lifestyles. And it's happening here. There's no attempt to do good. At a social level. Okay. Ha ha. One of the first churches built here in Adelaide, South Australia, around the turn of the century, after the Germans arranged for the state to come into existence, was a Russian church at the top of the Parade Nord on the left-hand side. And so no sooner did Audi move into Norwood than very elderly members of that church community came to Audi. And when I was at the checkout, there were 4 or 5 of them. They placed 5-cent coins, 10-cent coins on the checkout thing and just left. Totally political act. And the checkout girl didn't know what the hell they were doing. And now when I go to Audi's, I get followed there by, I don't know who, but I think Audi's not a bad store, except the serves are all much smaller. And you think, oh, I'm getting a bargain. I'm getting 4 pieces of chicken for $8. But the serving is half the size of, say, a serving from Woolworths. So they want you to say, "Hail Atlantis." I'm telling you, it's really a pity that the world's like George Harrison, for example. Oh my godfather! In the last 2 years, they've been advertising the source material for famous Beatle George Harrison and his so-called spirituality. Was related to an undertaker in Queensland who had a funeral parlour named Harrison's Funeral Parlour from 1925 onwards. So that was all just a con. Everything that they did, every little thing they did was a con. And therefore, if you want to just see them as they are, you'll see that they were some of the most violent, vile people known to man. And because of it, they'll go down in history and will be rewarded by the British government through meeting royalty and getting swords on their shoulders and all sorts of things. But, what they are is no more than vile, and I won't say scumbags because they're not even good enough to be a scumbag. Everything they do is a pretense, pretending to be someone who's better than them. Okay? Okay, all right, well, that's the end of this cigarette. It's 58 seconds. I'll now end the stream by saying God bless you.